Hi everyone, how you doing? It's Mark again. Been away for a week and it's good to be back. This is How We Did It Volume 8, and this time we're going to be talking about acid and the TB03, but more importantly focusing on a sample that I've used by Barbara Mason called Another Man. So friends of West End Records will like this volume for sure. So obviously a lot of us who are old enough remember how acid house and what have you came in the late 80s and caused a bit of an uproar, because before then there was, you know, straight Chicago house and you know, go-go and hip-hop were doing the rounds, and then there we had this ridiculous electronic sound coming out of a very small grey box actually that Roland made. And I've been doing a bit of research into this machine. I actually had one for a while and I never really turned it on because everything's in the box now, so shame on me. But the kid who bought it off me was very excited when they bought it. So anyway, the Roland TB03 was made by a guy called Tado, what's his name, Kikomoto, okay? So he also did the Roland TB909. Now between those two machines, the 303 and the 909, they pretty much define a very specific sound of house music in the mid-80s and coming through to acid, which came, let's say it came out of Chicago, or did it? Certainly the majority of records by Future and what have you, and Mr. Fingers that had that acid sound certainly came out of there. And we're going to go through a bit of the tunes, but check it out. So there's this guy in 1982 from India who decided he wanted to have a Roland TB303, and he did like a set of ragas, one called Raga Bhairav by Chanjrit Singh was this guy's name. So this was in 1982, long before people started getting involved in the house or the acid scene. And just check out what this sounds like. '82 in India. It's mixed beautifully as well. Okay, it's a head tune, so I don't want to get too stuck in that, otherwise I spend 10 minutes listening to that. So that was 1982. Guy had got this Roland TB0303, which is a failure actually. It was invented to try and give to guitarists who wanted to program a bass to play, say, acoustic guitar along, and it sounded like a chirpy mouth harp, people said. So it failed and it was shut down, and they sold off the stock of the 303 cheap, and that's why they ended up being bought by people who produced, you know, early acid house and what have you. But the earliest one that we would get an example of the 303 being used would be with a very lovely band called Haircut 100, who did Rip It Up. Orange Juice, sorry, who did Rip It Up. And check this out. This is a 303 being used in a chart record from 1983, I think. So that's a 303 there. You can feel the squelchy wetness. Classic tune, okay? That's pop 80s at its best. So, okay, coming into Chicago and its claim at acid house. Obviously, we've seen that the Indians were at it in 1982. But Washing Machine, Mr. Fingers, classic. Okay, very raspy, tweakily. It's hard to describe the sound, but it's two envelopes they had on the machine, so it wasn't really a bass in the end. It was just like an electronic bit of madness. Of course, in a more modern way, you had Higher States of Consciousness, which Josh Wink did. Okay, so you can see some of the classic tunes here that were made using the TB303. Now, so to take a flip here, I've just taken the spirit of that machine. I've not used it. I've used an in-the-box copy by a company called Silent. Purists will be like, you know, you had a 303, Mark, why didn't you use it? Well, it sat over in the corner there, and I turned it on twice, and I just, you know, it's a sort of sad indictment on the modern world. But it's a bit like an SP1200. They're wonderful, but you know, if you want to get on with sampling, then you just do it in your computer nowadays. Sadly, I'll just be honest with you there. So okay, so let's make a flip away from that. We're now going to talk a little bit about West End Records. Okay, so it's a lovely silver disc West End centre label on West End, and this is Paradise Garage era. This is post-disco electronica again, a bit like the other volume we did there. And this is a tune on the label, one of the biggest ones, called by Tana Gardner, called Heartbeat. And this was a big tune in street soul clubs, hip hop clubs, and was taken back into the charts by Eni Kamosi with Here Comes the Hot Stepper. So let's have a little blast of that. Crazy thing about that record is it's completely live. I mean, there's a big massive drum machine clap in there, but the bass and the drums, everything's sloppy as hell. So in a good way, you know, because they're grooving. So that's Tana Gardner, so West End label. So that brings us to a guy called Butch Ingram. Okay, so Butch Ingram's part of the Ingram family, who made an awful lot of tracks throughout the 80s and 90s. And Butch Ingram is, you know, I think on at least 200 or 300 productions. One of the most famous is by Ronnie Dyson, who isn't related to the chap who made the vacuum cleaners, but did a tune called All Over Your Face, which is still pretty much a dance floor standard nowadays. And what I like about this guy, Butch Ingram, is he he's a bass player, right? And it's very obvious, you can tell he's a bass player, because all of his tunes have amazing bass lines, and it's almost like he's started the whole writing process from the point of the bass line. So let's have a little quick listen to Ronnie Dyson. All right, bass line. Yeah. Really beautiful production and bass line. That was a DJ Spinner compilation M&M mix there. Okay, so that brings us to where we want to go. So as you know, with a bit of these historical journeys I go on, it brings you towards something that I've been working on. And I did this actually about 18 months ago. So anyway, Barbara Mason did a track called Another Man. Butch Ingram wrote and produced it. And that's what I started with. So I'm going to play you the original of this first, okay? So this was on West End Records, and it's a great tune. It's got a really sort of psychotic electronic bass line, which, if it wasn't for the chords and the melody coming in, it would sound like something from hell, which is the element of it I've taken, okay? So Another Man by Barbara Mason. Okay, here comes the sweetness, okay? Okay, copyright police and everything. Okay, so we're all squared away with where we want to be now, okay? So this example of modern electronica and my hip-hop vision of acid involves you taking that bass line, producing around it, and then using copies of the Roland 303 from Silent, and an a cappella by a guy called YZ, otherwise known as Anthony Hill, who basically featured on the First Rain Christian album, also did a track with Tony D called Thinking of a Master Plan, and is an all-round brilliant rapper, great lyrics, and spent some time with us in Manchester. I'll tell you a few stories about him in a minute. Okay, so here we go. My hip-hop version of Acid. So I'll play the instrumental first, as I normally do. I've got a little bit of Falling in Love by Surface in here as well. But he's got a lyric, YZ, in here that goes on about being like Charles Manson, but more handsome. So watch out for that. Okay, here we go. Okay, here comes YZ, yeah.
Since I'm slamming out rhymes with the slamming this, like Ralph Cramden, how many of you suckers out there think that you can handle this? None of you. Sucker who? I'll show what the sucker do. Brothers pump their fists, girls give me a kiss. Brothers know it's slamming, even their lover be dancing. Arsenio be playing it, Red Alert be slaying it. Kick Capri be cutting, and the suckers don't be saying nothing. Even Clark Kent gives the 9 number plate. Clark don't be playing, he's a super DJ. For fun, son, I like Charles Manson, but I am truly Jesus, and I'm much more handsome with the anthem.
So breaking it down. There's the Another Man bass line in there from West End Records, okay? On its own. Bass line part of it. There's quite a lot of production in there already. A really quite aggressive hi-hat, which, if I'm honest, I think it got remastered since then because it's really harsh. Kicks. Okay, I'm going to take all of Barbara Mason out. Here's the acid, okay, from a silence. Okay, that's where the rhythm is, okay. Bringing in, I've got Forget-Me-Nots claps. Remember the beginning of Forget-Me-Nots? That's from the beginning of Forget-Me-Nots by Patrice Rushen, and back in.
Son, I like Charles Manson, but I am truly Jesus, and I'm much more handsome with the anthem.
It's really quite a bad trip, this tune.
It's the anthem. Don't be having it. Parties in the decade, son, are known to get slayed for fun. Son, I like Charles Manson, but I am truly Jesus, and I'm much more handsome with the anthem.
Darkness, darkness.
It's the anthem.
Got some really scary. This is all stuff you can do with plugins. There's a silent here, which is probably out of date by a few years. Strange radio, Geiger counter noises. Anyway, so that's my version of acid and hip hop and rhyming with a little bit of a history there. So, thank you for watching. That was This Is How We Did It Volume 8, Barbara Mason and Acid. And yeah, got to say, it's a pleasure doing them for you. I'll be back with Volume 9 soon. And thank you very much for everyone watching. For a few points, I've got a Spotify account called Mark Ray Official. And for all of these volumes, I do a compilation playlist of the tracks that I'm mentioning. So this one up here is called Barbara Mason Acid, and it's got Mr. Fingers. It's got I couldn't actually get the Indian Acid track, find it anywhere on Spotify, but it's got everything related to it, so if you want to watch it. The track I've just played you is available for free on SoundCloud, like everything is nowadays, and I'll probably put up this version in the comments below for you to download for free. It's got an a cappella as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your support, and have a great weekend. Be careful out there in the cold. Lots of love from Mark, and I'm out.